Hello, everyone, and welcome to another bonus podcast. My name is Thaleia. I'm one of the pastors here at Northview. And of course, I'm joined by Kristal. Hello, pastor of women here at Northview. Today, we have a special guest. Her name is Cindy Schaefer. Cindy, say hello.
Hi.
So I've known Cindy for a long time. Currently, she is a school trustee here in Abbotsford. But I've known you for a long time. I think maybe at least 10 years ago, I was the parent advisory chair at Sandy Hill Elementary. Yeah. And we were building a new playground. And so you were the school liaison at that point to Sandy Hill. Yeah. So that's when I started to get to know you. Yeah. And then I found out that we both attend the same church. And then a few years later, we had you in our house to help us with some of the renovations because you're a designer. Yeah. And you've been very involved here at Northview in the design of this campus and the Mission campus. So it's fun to get to have you here on the podcast to join us today. And we're going to find out more about you, your role in the school trustee, your role outside of that particular frame. And we have lots of questions for you. So we're really excited to have you here.
Well, thank you for having me.
Mm-hmm. So can you start off and tell us a little bit about your family, your church, your job, just things like that?
Yeah, happy to. Thank you for having me.
Mm-hmm.
My family, I have 4 grown children. My oldest is turning 29, actually, in just a couple days. And my youngest is 21. Okay. I have 3 boys and a girl. They're all working, I'm very thankful for. And some have done a little bit of school, and mostly they don't really like school a whole lot, which is the irony, of course, being a school trustee. I attend Northview. I've attended Northview by, I think, probably about 15 years now, actually. Live here in Abbotsford, moved to Abbotsford about 23 years ago. Okay. Didn't really actually even think about getting involved in anything political until my kids started school.
Right.
Yeah.
Where did they start school?
So when we moved out here, our oldest went to Abbey Elementary, and he was there grade 1, first year in Abbotsford. And there was a conversation about the beginning of the traditional schools.
Oh, okay.
So I went to a few of those meetings, and so then when they started for his grade 2 year, we put Jesse in the traditional school, and so that was sort of my first introduction to Abbotsford in some ways.
So we've also been involved in the public schools. My kids started at Sandy Hill, went through Claiborne, and our oldest continued to Bateman through grade 10, and then she chose herself to go to MEI for grade 11 and 12. Our son asked to move to MEI in grade 7. But for myself, as a mom, I would have loved to stay in the public schools all the way through because it was in our community. Yeah. We could walk with our friends and neighbors, and they could go visit their friends and neighbors. I grew up commuting to school, so I have a thing about commuting because it has a bit of baggage with it. But so I was really excited about the public school system and was involved all the way through as PAC chair, even at Claiborne. And Kristal, you've been involved in both private and public. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so my 2 oldest kids went through public all the way. So they did Mountain Elementary and then Fraser Middle and Yale Secondary. And my youngest is now in grade 12, and he just switched to MEI now in grade 12. Right. And it was a wrestle for him all the way along because he's had good friends in both campuses and finally, or both Yale and MEI, and just decided he wanted to graduate with some of the people that he was closest to, although he has great friends at Yale too. So yeah, it's been an interesting thing. I was also treasurer on the PAC, never the chair. Didn't want that power.
I could never be the treasurer. Yeah, so that's just not a good role for me.
It was like a contained role for me. I thought I can help, and it's not like going to require too much time. Yeah. But so that was great. I really enjoyed those years at Mountain and Fraser and Yale. It was great. Great schools.
Yeah. So we're coming from a perspective of, loving our community and loving both public and private and supporting, of course, we have many friends that also homeschool and do all kinds of things like that. So that's the perspective that we're all 3 of us coming from.
Yeah, and just so you know, so my oldest graduated from Robert Bateman.
Okay.
My next graduated from the alternate education program at Bakerview.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
My 3rd graduated from traditional, and then my youngest also graduated from Yale. So
wow, that's 4 different schools.
I feel like I've been all over the place in terms of
perfect for you.
For both choice and alternate program. And so
you have a lot of firsthand experience that you bring to your work there.
Isn't that crazy?
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah. So
you didn't say anything about your job.
Yeah, tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, well, I forgot about that. So, I jokingly tell people that my paying job to support my school board habit is that I'm actually an interior designer. Okay. So I have my own interior design business, and it's actually also I feel very fortunate, very blessed actually that I'm able to do things that I'm very passionate about, and so that's how when Thaleia, when you reference my work here, I've done a little bit of the interior design work with the facilities here and in Mission for the church, and it's been a privilege to work on those projects. Probably the majority of my work in interior design is actually though with residential clients and projects. Yeah. And so hence, I did do a consultation for Thaleia when you were,
I know.
You guys were
Doing
looking
some
at doing
renovations.
Improvements at your house. And then the school board work is actually, it is a paid position. You can't, I can't actually pay the mortgage and put grocery on the table with it exactly.
Okay.
So it's a
little bit.
It's a lot of time and effort actually for the kind of work. Mind you, if I step back a little bit, I find I'm just a regular trustee on the board right now, but I have been board chair for many years and vice chair. That the workload is quite significant. When you're in those positions, or board chair in particular, and really it could be full time if you had the ability. It almost is full time at some weeks. But as a regular trustee, I feel like I'm able to balance it more. Okay. And then it probably also has a lot to do with your skill set.
Yes.
So right now, I'm a regular trustee, which is wonderful. And my skill set, I feel that I do a fair amount of committee work, although we try and share that load.
Okay.
And
So what would you say kind of hours per week would be an average?
Yeah, well, we do have some trustees that are working full time. And so I would think for them, maybe their commitment level is more like an 8-hour a week kind of a commitment on an average. And then really it can just go right through the roof in terms of your ability to commit. So I think the benefit of me being self-employed, having my own company, is I'm able to actually schedule around. So that's how I'm able to incorporate, I think, more of my time for school board, because I have that flexibility, and I'm flexing also with my clients. I sometimes work with clients on a Saturday. It's not my favorite first choice, but I'll accommodate that. So there's that flexibility when you're working for yourself, as opposed to punching a clock 9 to 5 or whatever.
Tell us a little bit about the makeup of the board, and how long have you been there?
Okay, yeah. So I'm actually this is the end. We're in our last year of this term, and so I've been elected 4 terms, and this is year 13.
Okay.
Just before this term, the school trustee and city councilor and mayor, these were 3-year terms, and now it has been changed. So we're in our first 4-year term.
Okay.
And this is year 13 for me, and it's been very, very interesting. You probably should know I am like the least political person. I don't like politics. I barely follow. Well, I follow politics a bit more, and so never. And this really is a political position. Yeah. But it's just interesting how that goes sometimes when. And I actually got into this. I was involved at my kids' school, and I said, I'm just kind of curious, like, how do decisions get made? And
be careful what questions you ask.
Oh, my goodness, absolutely. Yeah. So funny. So it was a very innocent trajectory in terms of and who makes the decision, and where do they get the information? So as I asked that simple question, be careful what you ask for, I got more involved with District PAC. And at a certain juncture, I was like, "Oh, I'm so done. I'm not doing anything."
Out of here. Yeah.
And then the ministry created school planning councils where parents had
I was part of one of those.
Yes, had a different sort of a role. And I was like, oh, this is so cool. So one of my girlfriends said, well, either you step up to the plate or So anyway, I said, okay, well, I'll hang in here a little bit longer. And then one thing led to another. And I had quite a number of people encouraging me to run for school board. And so I so I thought, okay, I think I'm supposed to do this. I don't know what I'm doing, but I think I'm supposed to do this. And so I ran, and that's how it goes.
Wow, that's really neat.
And so composition of the school board, folks that get elected to school board, I just want to put a plug for, I've worked with each election, you're not sure who your colleagues are going to be. But every board that I've worked on, I just have to put a plug in for those individuals, because these are people who really care about kids and education, and are willing to do the work. When you're, strategically planning, when you're addressing challenges and trying to solve problems in terms of your decision making, you have to work that out, and it's kind of like family, or even like you're in there, and you can have differences of opinion, but you still have to come back next week. And
you're kind of stuck with each other for those 3 or 4 years, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So you have to figure a way through it.
Yeah. So you have to keep going. So expressing your differences of opinion, I feel many times that I'm really appealing to my colleagues. If I feel that maybe I'm not sure how they feel about an issue, and I'm really appealing to them. I want to express it in a way that they understand what my concerns are or what my thoughts are, and I'm really appealing to them, whether or not do we have common ground. I love a process of talking things through. I love that I hear your opinion and think, I don't really see it that way, but is there a common ground? Is there something that we can actually build on? So I didn't know that, because I actually am not a very patient person, but I actually do love the process, and I love hearing the discussion, and I'm not afraid of the differences of opinion, and so that's been a good thing in this role.
Is that something that surprised you about yourself? Have you grown in that area?
I think so. And another area probably that I would have to, as I was reflecting back on, how I've gotten here, I remember at my first board, the board chair would say, well, Cindy, we haven't heard from you yet. Do you have any thoughts on this? And I'd be like, I would be the last one to speak, because I wanted to hear the conversation. Oftentimes I would have questions. I'm still not sure about, this aspect. So, I feel like I don't have enough information. But then what I discovered, which I was totally shocked, is that people would say, oh, wow, that's interesting. And now that Cindy said what's her views, I actually think that my views are more in alignment with that. And I'm going to retract what I said earlier about this, and the other thing. And I was like, wow, I can actually influence the conversation.
Wow.
And sometimes you just say something and it doesn't resonate. I feel sometimes, well, maybe I'm wrong. So I think humility can be a lovely attribute. I'm not always humble, but I think that humility is a lovely attribute, whether it's in me or in someone else. And so sometimes you're very passionate. Sometimes I'm very passionate. And other times I'm like, we just really want to do the right thing. So, how are we going to suss this out?
Yeah.
So why would you encourage someone to be involved?
Well,
I guess at any level, like PAC level, like you think of the different levels you've gone through, what would be the encouragement that you give to parents?
So, I'm a big be involved, groom where you're, or bloom where you're planted. Don't leave the important things to everyone else. Like, because we all have a skill set, and even sometimes we don't see how our skill set is going to fit in, and then afterwards, and so my experience is that afterwards I was like, wow, this is really interesting. I do have a skill set where I have something to contribute, but I think folks that are interested in children education, how the education system is working, and that's not to say that we're not concerned about our staff and our curriculum and all. It's the whole thing. But if you're interested in anything like that, you have a heart for it. I always had a heart for education, in that I felt very fortunate that I had somehow just enough encouragement to find how to navigate toward interior design, which I knew nothing about as a young person. And so I would love that every child, every student finds that where their niche is, where their skill set is, because that's the thing that propels them forward. And also it builds your self-confidence, and you're able to sort of, I don't know, kind of thrive.
Yeah, work
and
from an area of strength, right?
Yeah.
I feel like you can contribute.
Yeah. So that was a big motivator for me. And I also think that being in the culture, in education, whether you're an educator, whether you're a student or family, that is how we are salt and light.
Yeah.
So I would just encourage anyone. Some folks don't really realize the kind of work that a school trustee does, but we are the governors of the system, and we do the strategic planning for the district. I love it. Oh my gosh! We go to planning sessions, and I'm like, oh, I love this. This is so great. and other times I'm like, oh, I'm so frustrated because we're not moving ahead fast enough.
Yeah.
But sometimes when I told staff recently, oh, I just felt like crying when they brought a report to us. I was like, oh, finally we're seeing this thing coming ahead. Yeah, exactly. So, so that's, I don't know if that answers the question, really.
Totally, yeah.
So one question we would have is, you're on a board, I think 7 people, is that correct?
Yes.
So you come from different backgrounds, different ages, different faiths, different points of view, which is a really good thing, because that is our community and most communities, whoever's listening here, wherever you're from Mission or from Vancouver, it's a variety of a makeup of a community.
Yeah.
So that's a good thing. But with that would come some disagreements. Yeah. And in our culture today, it's going to the point where it feels like we can't have disagreements anymore. Which is not true. We really should actually have disagreements, but have them well. Right. Have respectful ones. So how on your board do you work respectfully through different things? How do you have respectful disagreements? Yeah.
I think back to the process of working through issues, challenges, the difficult conversations, we have to approach each other, and this is life. We have to approach each other in a loving and respectful way. And when it goes to that place of not good behavior, that has to be addressed, but I think it has to be addressed in a loving and kind way, where we say, hold on here, we do have differences this is life. We are not cookie cutter. We are not robots. So we do have differences of opinion. And how are we going to move this forward? Yeah. How are we going to navigate this? We actually have kind of a unspoken, or it's spoken, but it's not something we talk about when we make a board decision. When we make a corporate decision is made, even if I am the only one that spoke against it, that's a board decision.
Yeah. You're not going to go say, well, I didn't agree.
The corporate body, the corporate body makes the decision. Each of us have individual, and we have to sometimes remind ourselves, we each have individual ideology, worldview, religious, non-religious backgrounds, all of those things. But that's the bouquet of it. That's what that rounds out the flavor of the conversation. And in a society where we have diversity and differences, we want to understand that a bit better, but we also want to be able to represent that and articulate still our own views.
Yeah.
We don't have to lose that,
No.
but we have to do it in such a way that, how we approach people is so interesting because sometimes if we approach them in a way that is very heavy-handed, they don't actually hear what we're saying.
Right. No.
So how we approach people has to be in that softer, loving way where I have something to say, but I'm going to say it as best I can in a way that you can actually hear it, and you're not stopped by my body language, I don't know, attitude that comes through as being
really confrontational.
Mean-spirited sometimes, right? So,
We've seen that on our elder board when they sometimes disagree and they have to push and pull at an issue. And sometimes if someone feels that maybe they themselves have been a little bit heavy-handed, then there's been often apologies offered across the table.
Yeah.
And it's very good to see
Very
because
healthy.
they're just trying to work through an issue. And of course, sometimes our emotions get a little high or things like that, but we're still wanting to be respectful towards each other.
yeah, yeah.
So as long as everybody on the board has that same kind of commitment, right? And that there's an attitude or culture built within the board for that. It can
True
happen.
enough, Kristal, although I would have to say, even if everybody on the board doesn't, I'm still responsible for my part.
Yeah.
So perhaps I am then therefore there to be the bigger person. It never, regardless of the dynamics on a board, we are still, we still have to be what we're called to be, which is sometimes, the salt and light or the soft word or the person that comes over and says, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. Because you're trying to be a Christian in the midst.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Go ahead, Kristal.
Yeah. What kind of, over the years, when you think of 13 years, what are some of the big challenges that you've had in the past? Like, we think of current ones, but which we're going to talk about in the next little bit. But what kind of things have you encountered over the last 13 years?
There are a number of things. I think recently, actually, we just made a decision. We have enrollment challenges. Our facilities, some of our facilities are so overly enrolled. So we have some facilities that are 120%.
Wow.
We've had to take, not we, because our staff does this part. But in terms of governors, we've had to talk about, how many portable can we actually even apply for? Where are we actually going to even fit portables? So with the high enrollment, it's a challenge for us. And so those are good problems to have in the way. And so, over the years there have been things. There's always staffing changes.
Yeah.
That can be huge.
Yeah.
I've come to believe that leadership matters, and so who are in our positions of leadership, and the board hires our senior folks
For the school district. You're talking about,
right. And so those positions are very important, but also when there's big changes in some of those positions, then of course other things kind of fall a little bit to the side because that's really important. You can hardly move ahead until you've got those things sorted out.
People there,
Yeah. So our secretary treasurer, our superintendent, some of our senior staff, our assistant superintendents. We are very. I don't know if Abbotsford knows how fortunate and blessed we are. We have some really great leadership, some really great staff in our school district at all levels, all the way down to, whether it's a janitor in a school. But people playing their positions and really working hard to contribute to the well-being of each other and students and their families. So we are very, very fortunate. But so some of those things are challenges. So we a couple years ago we went through the reconfiguration decision about taking we had a few remaining schools that were K-7, and we wanted to bring them into alignment. Of course, for some folks, and I don't disagree, but that was a controversial issue for some families, and yet we're trying to weigh out what's the benefit in the long run.
Cost effectiveness and all those pieces, right? Yeah.
You name it.
Yeah.
Busing. Are we going to charge for busing? How much do we charge? Because we don't get funding for all of that. And boundaries.
Yes.
How do we reconfigure boundaries so that we're moving more children to maybe one location, or we're addressing an issue about a road or something so that we're not right. Things like that.
And all the schools of choice, right?
Yeah.
There are a lot of...
And we have schools of choice, programs of choice, right? We have academies. Should we... And we do ask the question, like, are we adding too much? Are we meeting the need, but or is it too complicated? Are we adding... So there's lots of... There's lots of things, and then there's always some moral things where you're also trying to navigate that within the culture and within, balancing the views of the community with all of the other things.
Which totally is a great segue into our next
there we go.
topic. Perfect. So one of the current challenges, as probably most people know, is the SOGI, sexual orientation and gender identity issue. And so we could use some clarification from you in terms of what's the difference between SOGI and the SOGI 1, 2, 3 curricular material.
Okay.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Okay. So about a year and a half ago, the Ministry of Education informed school districts that we needed to incorporate the SOGI, sexual orientation and gender identity, into policy. Every district needed to do that. And at the same time, the new curriculum, the revised curriculum for K-8, was being finished off, and so in that new curriculum is a SOGI component, as well as very purposefully, as well as a stronger First Nations component.
Okay,
and so in the media, people will sometimes hear about SOGI 1, 2, 3, and that actually is different than SOGI in the curriculum, in that it's actually a resource. So SOGI 1, 2, 3 is resource, so supportive material for the curriculum. And so that's where some of the conversation has been.
We know that some parents are upset about this. Can you tell us why you think parents might be upset about either SOGI or SOGI 1, 2, 3? Some of that might be the lack of clarification, but maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I think that some parents is partly the unknown, and this is new. The K-8 revised curriculum is new. It's looking different, as well as the SOGI is embedded in the curriculum, and so I actually am not fully sure exactly what that looks like. And so I suspect that that's part of the concern for parents. And there has been, conversation we're hearing out in communities about that. I think what parents really need to know is that there are ways for them to address their concerns. And this would be not just for SOGI, not just for whatever it is, a field trip or anything. If a parent has a concern, we always, the format has always been and still remains to go and talk to the person that is your direct person. So if it's a classroom teacher, go and talk to that person. But again, I have to emphasize that in the same way we were just talking about board work and navigating differences of opinion, that is how we have to approach people. in the marketplace, in education, we have to approach people with what is this looking, asking the questions, what is this looking like? Sharing our concerns without trying to impose our views. Yeah. So being open to articulating maybe we have extraordinary concerns. Maybe we have a situation at home where that is complicating life, and we say, we're concerned even just about timing. Mm-hmm. And I think that those conversations are the conversations where we have to start. And in terms of the system, if you're not satisfied with that conversation as a parent, then of course, then you go to the next person responsible. So often at a school, it would be then the principal, and have that conversation with the principal. And really ultimately, at any point, you can contact the board. You can send us a letter or an email, or give us a phone call, and let us know what your experience is, how you're navigating that, mm-hmm. and how that's working or not working, so that maybe there are things that we can do differently. Maybe there aren't. From the standpoint of the SOGI in the curriculum, that was a ministry mandate, so it wasn't an option for school districts. Okay. And so the curricular resources, there may be some opportunity for influence in that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're saying that there are some optional pieces within the SOGI 1, 2, 3 curriculum, or is that correct?
Within
the terminology is a little unfamiliar to me.
And that's okay. So SOGI is in the curriculum, but the resources have some flexibility. Which resources teachers choose to use? Okay, there is some flexibility there, and so it would be good to know. As a parent, you could ask those questions. What does this look like? How are you planning on addressing this?
Okay. And those are good questions to ask.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And just be salt and light. Yeah. Be kind with your words. Mm-hmm. It's people have a hard time hearing what you're saying if they're feeling like they're being attacked. But if you're willing to have the conversation and be a little bit vulnerable yourself with some of your concerns. Yeah. I think that opens up a conversation, or the possibility for a conversation that's more open.
Yeah. Yeah, we've talked a couple times about awkward conversations, and that's in all kinds of life, right? Mm-hmm. How we work through situations that are hard, and often we don't give the people the benefit of the doubt of entering in a conversation with questions, mm-hmm. and asking for clarification and coming with our guard down. We come in so heightened. And the thing I found really beneficial was just being involved with the school. Yeah. Then the teachers, right? If you've been in the classroom helping kids do their math times tables or their reading in the mornings, and you spend a day a week in the class, or a month in the class, you just get a feel for that classroom, and you have that, you gain the right to speak into it, mm-hmm. a little bit too. So I think the more parents can do that, even just we would go every Friday morning and read in grade 1 with our kids. Yeah. But those things give you familiar with the other parents, the other kids, the teacher, and you gain that right. Yeah. Because they know you're not an unreasonable person, right? They're going to be willing to listen to you if you've invested yourself in the school.
Yeah, and I would encourage parents to read online. You can go and look up SOGI 1, 2, 3 online and read all of the material, and you can look at the videos, and you can talk to your teacher, as Kristal said. I don't think we necessarily have to pull out of the public school system, because this is one challenge of many that we've talked about in the past. Yeah. But I would say that if you're in the public school system, is to be involved. Get more involved if you haven't been to this point. Even like you said, Kristal, if it's only an hour or so a week, or an hour or so a month, whatever it is that you can do, you will get an understanding of how your particular teacher, how your particular school is working with whatever challenge. This is just one of them.
Yeah. And I think as parents, we need to realize too that we are the primary educators for our kids in a lot of these things. Mm-hmm. We can't expect a school to do it. And so we have to be willing to have awkward conversations with our kids about these issues too, right? And so I think we have to all up our game to a certain extent. Yeah. And I know that's like Pastor Dwight coming on staff here, that's one of his goals, is really equipping parents to walk with their kids through a lot of challenging situations. And so I applaud him in that, because I think we need to be equipped. We need to know our culture and what our kids are going to be encountering in the schools, mm-hmm. and give them the tools so that they can walk through that.
Yeah. Because a lot of parents would prefer to wait and address the sexual orientation, gender identity issues until kids are much older. But in our current culture, because of our access to TV and Netflix and social media and all kinds of things, kids understand these issues young. And so we as parents, I think, sometimes need to remove the blinders and realize that our 4 and 5-year-olds need to understand this material from our perspective.
Yeah.
To the level that they can.
To the level
age.
that they can
Yeah.
appropriately, but we need to start entering the conversations. I'm an advocate of that.
Yeah.
Knowing your child, knowing for what they can handle and the words they can handle, but starting to address that at home from your point of view. And so since we're talking from a Christian point of view, it'd be like, what's God's design for sex? What's God's design for marriage? What's God's design? And yet still realizing that many people around us have different perspectives, and we want to treat them compassionately and respectfully and still be friends and be on soccer teams and be in dance together and enjoy each other.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So important.
I think that might be it for today.
Yeah.
Thank you, Cindy, for joining us. It's been a great entry into this topic. We know that there is more on SOGI and SOGI 123, but this is good for today, just to kind of give us a little bit of a taste.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I just want to close by saying if there's anyone out there who has a passion or an interest or an inclination to letting their name stand or getting involved, please call me. I'd love to chat with you.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
Get a firsthand feeling of what it's all involved there.
Absolutely.
So if you're wondering
'cause
how
we
to
need
do that,
good people.
Yeah, you can just contact Kristal or myself, Bonus Podcast, or at our personal emails, and then we'll get you in touch with Cindy if you want to talk more about that.
Awesome.
And if you've never considered being involved in your school at the school level, please consider it. Whether that's public or private or even in homeschooling, I know there's ways to be involved. That would be great.
Yeah, absolutely.
Why don't I pray for us and our listeners as we end? Lord, we're so thankful that Cindy could join us today and talk about her work in the community. We are so thankful that you've given each of us different skill sets, as she said. And Lord, I pray that our listeners would start to understand what they've been given from you and what their natural abilities are, and to use them for your honor and glory and use them for the good of their friends, their neighbors, their community, their coworkers. Lord, I pray that you'd plug us in where we can work for you. And so, Lord, with this topic, I pray that you would help us to address each other respectfully with much compassion and kindness and a willingness to hear and understand each other. Lord, I pray that you would grow that in us around this table as well as the people that are listening to this podcast. And so, Lord, we all ask this in your amazing name. Amen.
Amen.